Are you going to the vet?
Hello, and welcome to the Natural Pet Health segment of the Health and Wellness Show. Today we are going to talk about nutrition, or how to feed your dog and cat in a way that will contribute to the healthy and long life. And before we go into the proper way of feeding your pets, first let's talk about dry food and why it's the worst food you could give to them. Coincidentally, it also has to do with the main topic of the show. Okay, so what is dry food? It's a highly processed mix, grind to powder, that is comprised of various meat, including the non-meat parts from cattle, swine, or chicken, such as intestines, lungs, spleens, unborn fetuses, diseased livers, cutaway tumors, and other parts unsuitable for human consumption. Or it can be restaurant waste or out-of-date supermarket meat. And yes, also so-called roadkill, or cows that died on a farm but never reached the slaughterhouse. Yep, and I myself, when studied for the viral and bacterial diseases exam, saw in the book that according to regulations, meat that isn't allowed for human or even animal consumption can still be used to create dog or cat dry food. Some manufacturers try to cut costs and instead of meat add ingredients like corn gluten meal, soybean meal, and plant protein concentrate to get the protein up to acceptable levels. Other ingredients include carbohydrates or starch, a vitamin mineral premix, and water. And all this mix go through hours-long processing in high temperatures. The problem is that proteins tend to denature, to be distorted by heating. And these abnormal proteins may be a factor in the development of food allergies, as the immune system reacts to these unnatural shapes. And what about carbohydrates? Dogs and cats are carnivores. Dogs considered to be facultative or optional carnivores, while cats are obligatory carnivores. Meaning, both of them are meat eaters. Their natural diet is high protein and high moisture. Carbs constitute 1 to 8, maybe 9% at the most. The carnivore's ideal diet is essentially the paleo diet. Lots of protein and fat and a small amount of complex carbohydrates from vegetables. And the average dry food contains 35–50% carbohydrates. Some of the cheaper dry foods contain even higher levels. So basically, dry food, no matter how expensive, can be considered as optimal feed for both dogs and cats. And while dogs as optional carnivores have certain biochemical pathways that are designed to deal with carbs, cats are simply not built to process carbohydrates. Cats preferentially use protein and fat for energy, and these pathways are mandatory. Felines have very limited ability to process carbohydrates and are programmed to turn carbs directly into fat. They also lack specific enzymatic pathways that are present in other mammals, and they lack a salivary enzyme called amylase. It's an enzyme that catalyzes the transformation of starch into sugars. Dogs also don't produce amylase in the salivary glands, but we do. Both cats and dogs produce amylase in the pancreas. And so, since both cats and dogs have no really dietary need for carbohydrates, diet high in carbohydrates can be detrimental to the health. It is being made worse by the fact that corn, one of the main ingredients of dry food, has a high glycemic value, and grains that are also being used contain gluten. And it doesn't matter if a pet has gluten intolerance or not. Because of the specific physiology of carnivore mammals, any grains, wheat, barley, soy, act as an allergen. And yes, dairy products trigger allergic reaction too. The well-known notion that cats need milk is the biggest myth there is. The same is with fish, but it's another story. Coming back to grains, wheat and soy are the worst, while oats and rice are less harmful. Therefore, people in East European countries that can't afford to feed their pets with meat only do oat porridges and mix them with cheap meat cuts. And while it isn't ideal, it is still better than dry food, even if it's an expensive gluten-free or corn-free dry food. The simple fact is that animals require the food to be moist. Otherwise, it gets stuck in the digestive tract, leads to formation of urine crystals, and other problems. As it turns out, at the beginning dry food contained only corn, and then, after many complaints, manufacturers replaced it with wheat. But then some veterinarians noticed that pets' health experienced even further decline. Not to mention the fact that one of the leading cat diseases nowadays has to do with kidney problems, specifically renal insufficiency. Now, why do you think this is? The answer is right before us. You don't add the number one dog and cat food allergen to the diet without having some major repercussions. Apparently, the veterinary profession is short-sighted, just like the medical profession, because 60-70% of the modern diet is comprised of cow milk products and wheat. Well, there is a price to pay for this sort of ignorance, and it is heavier than most realize. The main cost is the disruption of proper digestive tract function. Once the essential nutrients have been malabsorbed for a long enough time, there is no way back. It depends on individual pet's immune system and resilience if they will become sick in the childhood, adolescence, or adulthood. But the bottom line is, when a pet consumes dry food, it is a matter of when they will develop problems, not if. Gluten will eventually affect every pet with its nutrient-blocking qualities. Here is an example of how exactly the damage occurs. Take conditions such as hip dysplasia, elbow and shoulder problems, intervertebral disc syndrome, cruciate ligament ruptures, and even heart valve failure. All of these problems are caused by failing cartilage and connective tissue, both of which are structured similarly and made up of calcium and collagen. Collagen is the building block of most of your skeletal support structures. The principal component of collagen is vitamin C. Therefore, when it is understood that calcium is absorbed primarily by the duodenum, the first part of the small intestine, while vitamin C and other vital vitamins and minerals are absorbed both by the duodenum and the rest of the small intestine, then it is easily seen that inadequate amounts of this in the diet or failure of their absorption will compromise the integrity of all of these structures. There are also other problems that are usually associated with dry food consumption, like diabetes, kidney disease, urethral blockage, urinary tract infection, development of crystals, inflammatory bowel disease, obesity, fatty liver disease, dental health, asthma, general poor health, and including weak immune system. Okay, so now you understand that you shouldn't feed your pet with dry food, but you are probably asking yourself what to do instead. And surely canned food is better than a dry one, but still, the quality of the meat is rather questionable, and there are cats and dogs that still develop various problems, including neurological ones. So it appears that raw meat diet is the most optimal. There are many sites and videos that provide detailed explanation and instructions about feeding your pets with raw meat diet. There are various techniques and ingredients. Unfortunately, expanding on one of those techniques isn't in the scope of this segment, and I also urge you to do your own homework. Read articles and watch videos. Each pet is unique, and so each situation. You need to find the best one for you. But several most interesting and informative links and videos will be included on the page of this show, so you can start with them. So that's it on that topic. Hope you found it useful. But before we go, I promised a friend to talk a bit about possible reasons for excessive drinking in dogs. Granted, this is a big topic that is more appropriate for a separate segment, so I'll just mention several key aspects and conditions that, as it turns out, can be also caused by bad diet, like eating dry food. So it can be diabetes, Cushing's syndrome, Addison disease, or liver or kidney disease. In all of these situations, better take the dog to a vet for a series of various tests to determine the nature of the problem. But as was already mentioned, first of all, make sure that you feed your pet properly and not with dry food. Another condition that is characterized by sudden excessive drinking and increased urine production may occur in intact female dogs, and it is called pyometra. Pyometra is a uterine infection and is considered to be a serious and life-threatening condition that must be treated quickly and aggressively. So if you have an adult intact female dog, that suddenly drinks and pees a lot, less active, and has an inflated stomach, take her immediately to the vet. Well, I think that this is it for this week. Thank you for listening and goodbye.